Welcome to the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast, the only show that dares to be both on topic and usually on location. Each time we meet, we bring together a group of IT luminaries to discuss a single concept around a premise. This episode's premise is embracing the bottlenecks of storage bandwidth. Before we begin, let's meet who's on the panel today.
Hi, Christian Mohn. You can find me on Twitter at Hubble, which is a long story, so I won't spell it out. And my blog is on vninja.net.
Hi, my name is David Klee, and I'm the founder of Heraflux Technologies and Sequilibrium Education. You can find me on Twitter at KleeGeek because, well, I'm a geek.
My name is Rob Koper. I'm a storage administrator. You can find me on Twitter at 50mu. And my blog is 50mu.net.
Now, most of us who have been storage administrators for our careers, and I count myself in that, and I think all three of you could probably count yourselves in this group too. Well, for one thing, we're not as boring as you think we are. But for another thing, we've spent the entire time throughout our careers fighting bottlenecks. I used to say that the whole story of enterprise storage, the whole history of enterprise storage is just one of moving bottlenecks from one place to another. Just as soon as you overcome one, you encounter another one, whether it's controllers or interconnects or networks or even like disk drives themselves. Remember when the disk drive was the bottleneck and we were trying to get around that with RAID? Anyway, what we've seen in storage architecture these days and systems architecture these days is a fundamental change to how we approach this problem. We're not talking about tearing down bottlenecks or improving just exponentially everything everywhere in hopes of never having any latency and having unlimited throughput. Instead, we're embracing them and we're saying, look, there's going to be bottlenecks. We need to say that we like slow storage over there. We like fast storage over here, and we're willing to put up with the challenges of managing all that. And I think this is a fundamental change. So I guess, Rob, let me start with you since, like me, you're an old school storage administrator. Does this like get under your skin to think that we're not going to fight bottlenecks anymore?
Yeah, fighting bottlenecks has always been the issue, as you just said. What I've been seeing in my environment is that you can speed up, for example, the fiber channel speed of SAN switches, go from 2 to 4 to 8 gigabit and even faster. But we've come across a lot of problems that all the equipment had to match that speed. So we settled at a speed, for example, 8 gigabit, and then we matched every equipment that was on the SAN to the same speed. And that's one bottleneck that we agreed upon. And the way to deal with that is, well, not make the speed higher, but make more of it available. So instead of 1 times 8, you can also do 4 times 8 to get more speed. So that's a thing that's been on my mind for the last few years at least. And for the rest, well, of course there are new technologies. We moved from spinning disks to SSDs to NVMe, host, of course, higher CPU speeds, more memory. You can never get rid of bottlenecks. It's just make use of them in the most efficient way.
Yeah, we're seeing the same kind of thing, right? Everything's going to quicker, faster, more agile, lower latency, whatever. But there is a limit to how fast we can actually do anything. We need to match kind of the bottlenecks in a way with the applications or the services that are going to use them, and kind of figure out which application fits on what storage. Secondary storage is one thing, cloud-based storage is one thing, local storage is one thing, right? And we need to kind of marry those things into a coherent kind of infrastructure that works, instead of trying to just put more coal in the fire to get it hotter and give everything the same kind of speed. That doesn't work, it doesn't scale.
Exactly. And in my world, I deal with really large database systems, and the standard DBA mantra applies. I want all of your storage, all of your CPU, and I'm going to eat it all now. And it just doesn't work like that anymore. You just simply can't throw millions and millions of dollars at these things. Now we have to start matching, what are acceptable bottlenecks for a different type and class of data in a given workload. If I've got a petabyte database, I'm not accessing all of that right now. So put most of it on slower storage. Those are acceptable bottlenecks. Work with the bottlenecks for the primary storage. And it could be the controller, it could be the interconnect. We're dealing with something right now where we're maxing out 100 gig interconnect, and that's fun, but that's still a problem. But let's just get most of that data off of there.
The thing that I came across is that I deal with customers sometimes, and they always say, give me the fastest storage, give me as much as you have, give me the fastest host to run my application on, and then you tell them what kind of money is involved with that. And then they suddenly don't want data application, they don't want the fastest storage, and they themselves go back to their bottleneck, what is acceptable and what is not. And often the customer doesn't really need the fastest storage. If you talk to them and meet their expectations, then you find out that getting rid of the bottleneck is not what you want. Well, it is what you want, but getting rid of the bottleneck is not where the customer needs to go. Just match what they need and you'll be fine.
I think that's the most interesting aspect of it, is that it used to be sort of this weird conundrum where we didn't have unlimited performance or unlimited capacity or unlimited anything. I mean, everything was very severely limited. And at the same time, addressing those things meant that any solution was going to be rapidly escalating in price to the point of unaffordable. But now things have really changed architecturally to the point where, an average laptop or server has NVMe flash that can outperform anything we've ever seen in the data center in the entire history. Storage systems, enterprise storage solutions are being built around these technologies, NVMe. We've got Optane persistent memory, we've got flash everywhere, disks have been pushed, and suddenly we can deliver something we never could before from a technical standpoint at a price that's affordable. And so it's really changed the way we approach the whole architecture, right?
It's changed the way I approach it from a big data perspective in a tremendous way. Just like you said, in the past, I'm going to throw everything that we've got at it. But now the bottleneck, as you speed up everything at the foundation, the bottleneck moves closer to the user. The question is, how close do you need it? What's acceptable? And what's acceptable for a given type of workload? And to piggyback on what Rob said, I do a lot of sizing for a lot of these kind of machines. And I might find that 10% of their workload needs fast and really fast. And 75% of what's left needs, not bad. So, let's work with those bottlenecks on those pieces. And then some of the, backup storage, secondary storage, who cares? As long as I've got decent throughput, I don't care about latency. It's just for backups, things like that.
Yeah, and everything moves in cycles again, right? So we had this a few years ago before virtualization, every local server had their own local disks. And then we put everything on an array and figured it should perform. And then you have all of those kind of IO blender mixer things going on, which we now can solve with NVMe, but we're still kind of differentiating between them again. So what was old is new again, right? So we're moving things around. We're putting some of it in the cloud. We're putting some of it on secondary storage, and I also think that a part of this is the mindset around the cloud kind of way of consuming services and applications, right? So you pay for what you need, and once you kind of put application owners in charge of paying for their actual need instead of their fairy tale wannabe storage, that flips the coin, because they're actually accountable for what the investments that are being done are. So that's also helping in this regard, and placing the bottlenecks where Well, they belong in, to be honest.
Yeah, and in that case, the bottleneck in some cases can be budget.
Exactly.
How much do you actually need, and how much are you willing to pay for? And yeah, when it's no longer free to them, oh, suddenly all these bottlenecks might actually be acceptable.
Yeah, let the customer work it out themselves instead of you thinking, what do they need? Just, they know how much money they have, they know how much more they can get, and they know eventually what is acceptable. Yeah.
And I think that that's another really interesting aspect here, is that it is the limits that have been placed on modern applications like cloud scale applications that have led the developers and database administrators finally to admit that they don't need everything. Because, you know, when you have everything at your fingertips in a flexible manner, and when your credit card is on the line, suddenly maybe you start approaching things a little differently. So, you know, I'm developing a web application and I realize that S3 is literally unlimited in terms of capacity, but not in terms of performance. And yet it's so flexible and so integrated and so wonderful that I want to use it. Suddenly you find ways of re-engineering your application to use that storage differently. And we've been fighting this fight forever, but suddenly we find the entire stack embracing it. Is that right, Dave?
And I still find that DBAs generally want everything now. They are a particularly stubborn bunch, and I say that because I am one. DBAs historically wanted everything. They want as fast as possible for every speck of data that they've got. Not a lot has changed with that. When you go up in the rank at an organization, then they're starting to realize this, and it's starting to come down the organizational silo, but DBAs in particular haven't quite learned that one yet. I wish they would.
So let's kind of turn the page and talk too about what's happened with the development of storage systems. And I think that that's one of the things that I've found most amazing in recent years as well, is that just like the application owner or application developers are recognizing that there are different classes of storage, you know, different levels of performance, different levels of latency, different levels of capacity, scalability, all those questions. So too are the developers of storage solutions. And so at Storage Field Day 22, as opposed to at Storage Field Day 1, we're seeing systems that are almost unrecognizable as storage systems. So I remember spending a lot of time obsessing over scale up versus scale out and dual controller designs and all of these kind of like old school storage engineering questions. And now all of that is basically out the window. Like we don't even worry about RAID levels anymore. Remember when like RAID 6, everybody's arguing about what is and isn't RAID 6? Well, now we kind of don't care. I mean, it's like nobody uses that garbage anyway, so everything's different. Disaggregated storage and different levels of storage at different points of the pyramid, that's the norm now. And how does that change your perspective on storage? I'll throw it at Christian because, you know, you've seen a lot of different storage solutions over the years. How does a disaggregated storage solution, or even like a software storage solution like vSAN or something, how does that change your approach to storage generally?
Well, it's like you said, right? You don't care about the RAID levels on the physical hardware anymore. It's policy based. It's, you define a policy and that's what you get, right? If you have sized everything correctly in the back end and everything is on scratch there, but it kind of eliminates all the storage specific kind of knowledge in a way. For the administrator part of things, you still have to architect it properly. You still have to use proper kind of both software solutions for it and the hardware as well, which is that's one of the things that's been an issue with software-defined storage, is that you can actually pick and choose whatever components you want, and then it might not totally fit, and then you try to coerce it to fit, and then it crashes. So you still need to know your stuff, but it kind of moves everything away from it. It does with storage what we did with virtualization, basically, like abstract away things, which opens a new can of worms, but it's flexible.
As a DBA, my experience is now polar opposite, which is fascinating, because let's say 5-10 years ago, me managing big databases. Okay, I've got hot data, I got 20-year-old data, I got data that people are accessing right now. Throw in one bucket. The storage is all the same. It's fast. Okay, well, now look at today. I'm inheriting, I've got one right now. I have a single database that is 471 terabytes. It's still one big bucket. 99.9% of that data is just sitting there. Somebody might look at it once a year. So now, as a DBA, I have to start learning storage architectures, because now I have to figure out, how do I slice and move and carve my data around to put it on the tier that's appropriate for that type of data, and not just do it once, but then find a mechanism that moves older data from faster storage to slower storage when the time is right. And the education side of this, from a DBA perspective, they've not been exposed to this kind of hardware before. They just assume storage is storage. And now I'm having to go educate people all over the place to help them understand what needs to be done to take advantage and work through the bottlenecks where appropriate and move this data around.
That's kind of funny, David, because what you're doing there is basically replacing what we did with storage arrays years ago with hot and cold tiers.
Yep.
And now you, the DBA, has to manage that instead of me, the storage admin, which suits me fine.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know the data. I don't.
Exactly.
That's a difference, right?
Exactly. The bottleneck has now become the person at this point.
I'm wondering, David, can you actually classify the data in your really big database in such a way that you somehow can make a decision on what data you have to move to another database or another disk? Or
Oh, sure.
I really wonder, how do you do that?
Depends on the system, but in some cases, there's simply a flag, last access time.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. In other places, it's simply data older than a certain point in time, sliding window, like 2 or 5 years, things like that. In other cases, who knows? We're dealing with a bad application design, and I have no way to mark it. So you're kind of at a guess by looking at just simply access patterns by table and by index and things like that. So it's kind of all over the place. There's ways. They're not very fun, but there's ways.
I guess if you did that a few years ago when we were still on spinning disks, running all that analytics also cost performance. So you start nagging about the performance, but you were actually causing the problem by doing this.
Oh yeah, I mean, the monitor for performance is a constant drain on performance, and it's hysterical when you sit back and think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember back in the day trying to get DBAs to allow me to run agents on their hosts so that I would have any insight at all into even like basic questions of like, capacity utilization. And it was always like, no, that agent is going to kill my performance. And now it's very different. I think now there's a much more integrated approach to architecture.
There is. And yeah, back in the day, I would tell you just good luck. DBAs are a stubborn bunch. Today, it's kind of an assumption. Most of telemetry is pretty lightweight. So it's better than it used to be, but it still can happen. I found a security tool just a couple of days ago, 25% performance penalty on a big database server. It was eating more CPU than the database engine.
So it really is ironic that we've gotten to the point now where, because we can offer unlimited capacity or even unlimited performance, effectively unlimited performance, it means that suddenly we're starting to look at these things differently. I think that maybe it's almost a mindset difference, whereas back in the day, it was one of those cases where it was always a fight. It was always a battle to see, every time you're provisioning storage for an application, it was like literally going into battle. You got to arm yourself with all the data. You got to walk into that room and you have to put on your game face, because what's going to happen. They're going to want more, and you're not going to be able to give it to them. Now, the doors are blown open, and they can have anything they want. You need, and we've seen that with some of the companies that have presented at Field Day, some of the things that, like I said, with like Optane, you look at these companies, like Hazelcast and Memverge and so on, that are doing amazing things with memory as storage. And then you look at on the flip side, some of these companies that are doing, scale out object stores and so on. We never had that capability before. So anyway, it is just a pretty remarkable thing. I guess, how does this change how we storage people assess the products that we're looking at? Are we looking at them differently? I mean, is mid-range storage, middle of the market storage still a thing?
And what I'm seeing with customers locally here is, and again, I come from the virtualization side of things, so that's kind of my viewpoint on pretty much everything. So it's a lot of software-defined storage for virtualization right now for VMs and stuff like that. And then we're looking at, we're seeing secondary storage for backups, a lot of that, and we're seeing pretty much NFS for whatever else, if it's not software-defined. And that's it. So we're kind of done with the fiber channel, iSCSI, fiber channel over token ring wars. We're not talking protocols anymore. We're talking specific latency, disk, access times, seek times, and policy-based management, and that's it. We don't really care that much about the underlying infrastructure anymore, as long as it's actually there. People care when it's not. That's a different story. But so we're kind of not doing all those holy wars about protocols and all of that stuff. Everything's an API these days anyway, so who cares?
Exactly. My world is even simpler. Latency. Read, write. I don't even care about IOPS anymore. I just assume that the IOPS capability of the storage is greater than what I need. So literally, what's the fastest possible transaction time that I can get to change data? And when it comes to reading data, what tier do I need? That's literally my world right now. You know, vSAN, fiber, iSCSI, I don't care. It works. I just need it to be faster than what I need.
Interesting. Faster than you need. And so not as fast as you need.
Well, I got to have headroom because people are storing more and more data every single day. And databases are a living, breathing animal. You know, I like to tell people that the clothes that your 5-year-old wears aren't going to fit them when they're 10. Data grows over time. I need headroom to be able to allow this thing to live and breathe and expand as needed. You know, I don't need to go buy a Ferrari if I'm just going to get groceries, but I need a minivan that's going to allow me to cut over in front of somebody to go merge onto a freeway.
Look at it from the storage admin side. You want more than you need. Why don't you agree? Why don't you accept simply what you need and let us deal with the technical advancements that the storage equipment can get in a few years? So when you need more, we have new equipment. It automatically is faster. That's your headroom.
I'm going to speak as a jaded DBA here. If you keep up with the technology, and if you're able to deliver what I need 3 years from now, then awesome. I'll ask for what I need today, and you keep up with me.
Yeah, and we all know that's not happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why a lot of stuff happens to move to the cloud and then actually move back again as people realize the cost of actually doing that.
Exactly. Keeping up with this stuff is hard. You know, it's honestly how I named my company, constant change. You know, it's hard. So as a DBA, we generally ask for more than we need up front, knowing that the volume of data is going to grow, knowing that the organization, I don't want to say can't keep up, but has more difficulty keeping up than some of the other application layers.
So one more thing I want to bring up is, you know, are we drunk on performance? Is that what's going on here? Because if I can, so my friend, our friend, Shinfa, over at his Storage Gaga blog recently brought up a blast from the past, John Tuigo's Holy Grail of Data Storage Management book. And he brought up Tuigo's framework for enterprise storage. And there's a big long list of things that are required, 8 things that are required for something to be considered enterprise storage. Performance is only one of them. Are we drunk on performance, and have we forgotten about availability, protection, accessibility, recovery, management, security, and compliance?
As a DBA, I just assume all of that's there. You know, from a storage admin perspective, you all make me assurances that all of those are in place. And then I'll just abuse your storage just like always.
Okay, Rob, Christian, are those things in place still?
Yep, they are.
Well, I'm a consultant, so it depends. I mean, a lot of that stuff is now moved over to the application layer more than it is on the storage layer, right? A bunch of applications, be it SQL or Oracle or other applications, do their own clustering for high availability. Do you need to then replicate that data between data centers, for instance, for high availability concerns? I would say that for the most part, it's easier to do that, or better to do that in the application native tools than doing it on the storage array, because then you don't have to have similar storage arrays on both sides, and you can do it in software in other ways as well. But for the main part, for the storage admin side of things, or the virtualization side of things, I would think that it's much better to leave that to the DBAs and let them wreck their own stuff, instead of having me do something that I'm not sure I understand how the transactions work, and I need to replicate that to a secondary site. It's much better to leave that to the guys closest to the application and the data. So again, moving the bottleneck back to the application owners to define them at least what they need. And if there are native tools, use those.
As a DBA, I completely agree.
Yeah, actually, I agree as well. Let the DBAs or the application owners set up their own high availability, and well, yeah.
I'm happy to provide the infrastructure for them to do that, but they are the guys or girls or aliens or whatever that actually knows the application and the data. I don't.
Yeah.
So let the people who knows the application, the data, the availability requirements, the performance requirements and everything actually manage that part of it, because they actually know what they're doing.
Well, calling application owners aliens is perhaps the most storage admin thing I've ever heard, and it's also so true.
I'll own that. No worries.
So let me ask you guys to sum up here. The premise of today's discussion was that it's time to embrace the bottlenecks. Are we doing that? Let's just go around the horn here. David, are we embracing the bottlenecks?
I think we are, carefully. You know, we just like we all said, you now have the potential for unlimited everything, and now we're saying you don't need that. Let's work with what we've got. Let's work with what's appropriate for the type of data. And I think, you know, managing it appropriately means we're going to simplify the environment. We're going to work within the bottlenecks of a given tier, and we're going to be smarter about how the data is being managed.
Christian, embracing the bottlenecks?
Not as much as we should. We're still doing a lot of let's put everything on the same kind of storage thing, be it external storage or local software-defined storage. Doesn't matter. We're still kind of doing that IO blender thing, and we're kind of alleviating some of the issues by using NVMe, but that doesn't actually fix the problem. It just masks it, right? So we, as storage admins, also need to be pushed more for doing separate kind of storage for separate kind of data. We need to kind of spearhead that part of the architecture design as well. We can't leave everything to DBAs. That won't work in any way. So yeah, or leave it to the aliens for that part. I mean, we need to kind of find those islands of data and appropriately size those for the specific data. And we need to help the application owners, DBAs, virtualization admins, or application admins, or whatever, to actually define those goals and make that happen, because that's the only way we can actually move on from putting everything in a single basket.
Rob, are you ready to embrace the bottlenecks? Well, I agree on Christian's story. Work with what you've got. Leave a lot of high availability decisions to the application owners, and provide your application owners with the hardware. Let the storage admin manage the hardware, and let the application owner care for the high availability. Yeah, that's a trend we've been seeing the last years, maybe 10 years, and it's getting more and more like that indeed.
Yeah, as for me, my perspective as a storage admin is simply that, the job of the storage admin has always been to remind everyone involved of those fundamentals of storage, to remind everyone involved that we have to think about availability and protection and accessibility and management and compliance and all those other things in addition to performance. And in the old days, the only way to achieve some of these things was through the use of a centralized storage array, like a RAID system. Nowadays, we've got 100 different ways to take advantage of these and to deliver these things. It always made more sense to move availability and recoverability and backup and everything closer to the application instead of having it be some function of some low-level, storage array. And so I personally am excited to see the fact that we finally have technologies high up in the stack that can provide the kinds of availability you never could get without like a high availability fiber channel storage array or something in the past. So yeah, I think there's a possibility here, and I for one am ready to embrace our alien partners on the application side, just as long as they keep in mind that there's more to storage than performance. So thank you all for joining us today. Before we go, I'm going to go around the table here. Where can we follow you and catch up with you and follow your thoughts on enterprise storage and other topics? And is there something recently that you've done that you'd like to call out special attention to, Rob?
You can follow me on Twitter at 50mu or my blog 50mu.net. My interest at the moment is going to NVMe. I'm not really going into the software solutions myself, but that's where my interest is at the moment.
David?
Hi, you can find me over at davidklee.net and at Twitter at KleeGeek. And actually, I just 2 weeks ago released a blog post on how to take a single SQL Server database file that might be massive and distribute it to more data files for more disks and better distribute across your storage. So exactly what we're talking about here, how to properly use the storage tier that's appropriate for the data to get better performance when you need it.
And Christian?
Yeah, you can find me at Hubble on Twitter and vninja.net for my blog. I haven't published anything lately, but we've been working a lot with VMware Cloud Foundation bring-ups in the last few months with my team at Proact. So that's kind of where my main focus is right now, is deploying large-scale VMware Cloud Foundation solutions.
And as for me, you can find me here at the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast. You can also find my other podcast, Utilizing AI. We're starting a new season 3 of Utilizing AI in September. Excited for that. One thing that you can catch all of us at this week is Storage Field Day. If you go to techfieldday.com, August 4th, 5th, and 6th, we're going to be hearing from a bunch of interesting companies, Infrascale, Intel, Cetera, Comprise, Fujifilm, and Pure Storage at our Storage Field Day event. And all of these videos are going to be published at techfieldday.com, as well as our YouTube channel, YouTube/techfieldday. So if you're excited about storage like we are, there's a lot of great content that's going to be coming out just as soon as you listen to this podcast. So please do join us as well for the Storage Field Day event. And thank you so much for joining us for the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do subscribe. We publish a new episode every week or two. And please give us a rating or review on iTunes, since that does help. And share this show with your friends, not just the storage admins, but the application aliens need to hear from us too. This podcast is brought to you by GESTALTIT.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise. For show notes and more episodes, go to GESTALTIT.com/podcast. And we'll see you next time.